welcome to the interview workshop. Like I said before, we're going to be talking a lot about, well, a couple of things. So, what I've prepared for today is essentially three key parts. So, firstly, like I said before, we're going to be covering interview preparation approach. So, what do we actually need to do to help us best prepare for the interviews? And then run through some answering frameworks and theory. So, it'd be things like, okay, with this kind of station that we have here, how do we best demonstrate the qualities that they're looking to find? And essentially, and also cover things like structure, but keeping in mind that the MMI is very different to an essay. So the structure is a little bit different, but the same principles are kind of there in terms of signposting our answers and making sure that content actually demonstrates something that they're looking for. And of course, practice stations. Right. Let's get into it. So, a couple of things here in terms of the preparation approach. Very important to firstly distinguish that most of the universities will be via MMI stations, which I think 90% of the universities will use MMIs, but within each of the unit, across different universities, they'll have different variations. So some of them will be 1 minute per station or per question. Others will be longer. So it is your responsibility to sort of figure out what that is. And you want to figure this out early because you want to be targeting and doing preparation to that particular format way before you get an interview offer. And this is important because you just want to maximize your time. And so make sure you're preparing for the right kind of format. Okay. But for the most part, most of the topics across the universities are the same. So it'll be things like ethics, DTech, problem solving, reflections, experiences. Those kind of things we'll cover later, but most of the universities will cover those kind of topics. I think panel interviews very quite rare. I believe it's only Flinders. I might be wrong, but it's a very different kind of interview. Okay. Grading and assessment. So I just want to make the point that not all unis will provide you with feedback. Especially when you're successful, they won't provide feedback, I'm pretty sure. The other thing is there are instances where people request like freedom of information to figure out what the scores are. I know UQ definitely provides grades because I'm seeing a lot of these interview tutors advertising their grades. So most likely UQ does provide marks. Okay. So I've extracted these online, but you can sort of see that there's variations across different universities. I would be careful not to rely on these, and just sort of, I suppose, be cautious in thinking that it will be the same this year round. But it's a good starting point. Okay, so you'll note that in this particular diagram, some of the unis don't have particular kinds of stations. However, I think it's still good to practice them because you never know when they're going to add that station in. So the key principle here is that there's never any kind of guarantee as to what they'll include, what they won't include in the interview. So the best thing to do is just be safe. And not only that, so you see how DTech is only in UniMel, but it's not in the rest. Even if you are practicing for DTech, it's practicing communication skills. Okay. So don't kind of discount certain stations and believe that not practicing it is not going to be worth your time. And that's kind of the key message. Okay. So, like I said before, how do we actually prepare our interviews? A good way to do this is by looking at the subject handbook entry. So this is the link to UniMelb's Doctor of Medicine entry requirements, and that just sort of details the process in terms of what you can sort of expect, because there are some documents that the subject entry the website will have in terms of how does their MMI process work? What are some qualities they're looking for? So for your respective uni, look up the subject handbook entry and see whether or not there are additional details that you guys can find online just to help you understand the process. Because even though they'll give it to you, it's good to be prepared early. Okay. Some universities do interview info sessions. Pretty sure UniMelb did do a couple, but more so an application info session, not for interviews specifically. Okay. And then the other thing is, I'm pretty sure I would have said this before to you guys, but determine figure out which particular interview you're more likely to get, and just target your interview to that particular uni. So the spreadsheet is here. I'm sure most of you guys have already done that. Okay. Previous interview experiences online. This is kind of it's a bit sketchy, but some people. So the interviews would definitely get you to sign an NDA, but for some reason the experiences are somehow leaked online anyways. So I don't know, search through Reddit, see if you can find people's experiences of interviews, because most might be there, depending on how strict the moderators are. The only thing is, there used to be a very useful forum, I don't know if you guys know, called Paging Doctor. It no longer exists, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm just replying to a text. Yes, it will be recorded. No worries. Yeah, so Paging Doctor did have a lot of people's experiences for certain interviews. However, they are like from 2019 prior. So you can debate whether or not it's worth to find anything off of Paging Doctor. There might be an online archive for it. So, and yes, practice according to specific university constraints. That goes without saying. So, what can we do to help ourselves? Skills and experiences bank. Like an ideas bank, which I keep harping on about in section 2, we also have a skills and experiences bank. So we do the same thing here. So this is sort of where you want to categorize your experiences into certain skills or situations. So you can see the example here, teamwork. And then you have to figure out, okay, what in my life in the past 5 to 10 years, even through high school, what demonstrated teamwork? And then you have to ensure that when you include that particular experience, reflect on it. Think about, okay, how does working in a cafe mean that I have demonstrated teamwork? What did I learn from that experience? So one of the universal qualities that all universities want for their medical students is this ability to reflect. So this is where you have to really think about, okay, what happened in that situation? What did I learn from it? So you always have to make sure there's some kind of lesson that is attached to the experience of, say, working in a cafe. And so you just do this for anything, for as much as you can, for your entire life back through high school, basically. Okay. And the other thing is video record yourself. It's very important because you don't actually realize the impression that you give when you don't realize it until you record yourself, basically. So you got to look at things even as small as things like eye contact, your body language, your speech, your verbal content. How are you speaking? And what makes someone interesting to listen to versus someone who's boring? And these are kind of things you want to figure out, because an interesting person has variability in their speech, whereas a very uninteresting person has a monotone voice and is just stable, and there's no variation, and things just going on and on and on. There's no use of pauses for effect. So keep an eye out for those kind of things. But I'm not saying it should be turned into a speech, but you just want to make sure that things come across as authentic. They 100% will be able to tell if you're recalling things from a script. So whilst you do want to have a script in your mind, it shouldn't come out like a script. If that's what makes sense. Okay. Tips and pitfalls. So yeah, this is kind of basically what I said. Avoid memorization. You need to present a thoughtful impression rather than a robotic response. But you can learn this. Okay, you can learn to be, someone who thinks about things on the spot, but really you've thought about it in your mind. It's basically what I've been doing this whole time, right? Like, I'm using pauses throughout my speech. I am varying the length of what I'm saying, and there is changes in intonation, and that's how you make things less robotic. Okay. And of course, the other thing is, listen to a TED talk. What makes them interesting? Focus on the body language. Focus on the content of the speech and how they're delivering it. That's something that you can always try to optimize your delivery of your responses. Simplify experiences as well. Look, this is where they can't verify the truth. They can suspect falsity, but as long as you make it genuine in terms of have an actual learning, have an actual reflection, they, for all intents and purposes, cannot say that this person was lying. Okay. But of course, we don't really want to, that shouldn't be something that we resort to. If unsure, be honest. So this is sort of where they can, if you're having trouble, just say like, okay, I'm not clear about Australia's vaccination program. However, I would like to conduct further research and online and look at the national immunization schedule to learn more about how this affects the patients that I might be interacting. So, demonstrate honestly that you don't know, because that's actually a good quality of a doctor where if you're operating outside of your scope, you risk harm to the patient. So even if you don't know, if you're honest and you say that, okay, you'll learn, you'll read more, that's demonstrating a quality that they're looking for. Okay. But for the most part, stations shouldn't be, you shouldn't come across something that you shouldn't know. Jump straight into the answer. You don't have a lot of time, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Just go straight into it. Don't waste time. Signpost. Okay. There are two things I'd like to discuss here. Firstly, blah, blah, blah. Talk about your first part. And then secondly, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. And that was my structure because you don't have any time. Genuine strengths and weaknesses, pretty obvious. Don't say this kind of rubbish. I work too hard. I'm a perfectionist, because they're going to ask you follow-up questions and you'll crash and burn. So have an actual genuine strength and a genuine weakness. A genuine strength could be, I'm someone who's very committed. I always like to do things properly. And I don't want to do things where, if I'm doing this without my full commitment, I'm someone who thinks that, okay, why would I do it at all? And another weakness could be like, okay, one of my weaknesses is I um, I get carried away with my hobbies or my interests, where I really, really enjoy those hobbies, but I get carried away. And then the follow-up question is, how would you address the weakness? How did you manage the weakness? And then you have to then think about that. So make sure that whenever topic that you're studying for, be prepared for the kinds of potential follow-up questions that you can get. All right, optimize technology. I actually bought a new webcam because my original webcam was rubbish. So just make sure that everything works. Like your computer has like, I don't know, has enough RAM to run the program. All right, you've updated everything. Okay. All right, answering frameworks and theory. Desirable qualities of a doctor. I've said this before, but a really good way to make sure that we're preparing for something that they want to see is, like I said before, look at the course handbook entry and try and identify the core attributes. So this is from Unimel, and you can see here, as a professional and leader, as a medical practitioner, and they go into this with quite a lot of detail. Working effectively and respectfully as a leader or co-member of intra and interprofessional teams. Recognizing the contribution of all healthcare teams members to shared learning to improve patient and population health outcomes. That's quite a lot. It's quite dense, but you have to simplify that and think, okay, what is that meaning? What does that mean? This means teamwork, doesn't it? Right? Working effectively and respectfully as a leader, was it leadership or teamwork? Engaging as a self-regulated learner and being aware of one's own capabilities and limitations, along with seeking opportunities for continual improvement of their knowledge and skills to enhance their performance. So see this, once again, complicated, but what does this actually mean? This is talking about being self-reflective, self-regulated learner. And reflection shouldn't be something that you guys aren't familiar with, because, you've all gone through lesson 6. There's a reflection part in it, and that's the whole point of why I put that there, to give you this kind of starting foundation to be more confident in reflecting and preparing for your interview, because it's an essential skill. So you might as well just chuck it into section 2 preparation, which I did. So look through the course handbook entries. Look for the core attributes of what they're trying to develop in the graduates and reverse engineer the process. So identify these attributes, simplify them, and think about, okay, I probably should prepare a situation where I've reflected on something and changed the way that I did things. Okay. Now, importantly, they don't expect mastery, but they want to see that you've at least started to do something like that. Okay. So if you've never really thought about things like your learning needs, which is a topic, which is essentially, it'll be questions like, okay, how do you learn? How do you identify your learning needs? All right. How do you address your learning needs? If that's something that you don't really know, do research, figure out and learn online how other people do things, and then see and try to identify that kind of those processes and those approaches in yourself. Okay. So they don't expect mastery, but they want to see potential, and they want to see that in your answers. Okay. All right. Moving on. So key topics. These are some of the topics that I'll send you guys the slides, so don't need to write all this down. These are key topics that they can touch on, but it's not exhaustive. Okay, so there's a lot, absolutely, but then that's kind of the preparation that you need to do because all of these are fair game. Okay, so it's not just all ethics and legal principles, as much as as popular as the four pillars of medical legal principles are. There's a lot more to talk about. All right. Not going to go through all of these, but you can sort of see the description in terms of what are some things that they can ask you, right? So teamwork and leadership. How do you work well in a team? Why is teamwork important? Tell me a time of when you demonstrated leadership. Tell me a time where teams didn't work. Why didn't it work? How did you resolve the situation? Okay, so always always consider the combination of potential follow-up questions. And what's universal across all stations here is what did you learn? What did you change? So once again, going back to those fundamental principles of reflection. Okay. So in your experiences bank that we talked about at the start, always consider what did you learn from it and what did you do to change and improve yourself. Okay. All right. So this one here, some of the other things that they're wanting you to know about include public health issues, programs, and services. So, like I said before, you don't need to be an expert in these things, but just know that it exists. Know that there are things like national immunization schedule. You might not, and also know about like important health issues like smoking, obesity, so cardiovascular disease, those kind of things, and dementia as well. An aging population is a big issue. So the very basic common health issues you should try and get a basic understanding of. Okay. First Nations health and cultural sensitivity. I think this would be a very hard station to include, but you should try and understand this a little bit. It's quite difficult, and I don't think they would expect you to know anything about First Nations health, but it's good to be prepared. Okay. And the advice I would give here is that I would advise you against bringing up First Nations health if you have the option not to. So if you have to talk about it and they ask you about it, then talk about it. But if they're requiring you to discuss a health issue, pick something easy like smoking. Pick something easy like aging population. Don't talk about First Nations health because it's hard. It's complex. Problem solving, detect practical tasks. This is something that's a bit more atypical, but demonstrates important skills such as problem solving, communication. Okay. A bit harder to practice for, but as you'll see in later stations, you get an idea of what they could ask you. Personal motivation, stock standard, you need to have responses prepared. Okay. So, might have alluded to this before, there are atypical and typical stations. So, conventional stations are those that you would typically expect and heard of in terms of what people have been experiencing in those kind of stations. And I think in recent years, there's a move towards unconventional stations, at least for my sitting for the interview, where things start to come a little bit left field. It becomes really unpredictable and hard to sort of predict. Like it wasn't something, like none of it was something that I expected. But they, of course, all assess important key skills that they're looking for. So this is an example of a conventional station. Of course, it's not going to be written like this. It'll be like one question per page. But it'd be things like, okay, when have you faced difficulties as part of a team? How did you resolve it? What are the disadvantages of teamwork? And in instances of unequal contributions in the team, what would you do? Very, very straightforward for a conventional station. So this is an unconventional station. We're going to have a look at this. And there's no audio. So first question would be describe what you see. And then the second question is going to be like, how would you resolve the situation? And then recall a time you experienced conflict in the team, recall a time a decision affected someone else. So can you see how that's atypical? It's very different. However, the teamwork, the underlying principle of what they're trying to find is still there. So be prepared for these kind of esoteric, strange situations where you're going to have to do something that doesn't seem like directly related to medicine. I'll give you another example. All right, this is a picture. This is another picture, completely unrelated to medicine. But then they ask you, describe the first picture, describe the second picture, and then what are the similarities, what are the differences? So this station is actually assessing your communication skills. So it's assessing communication skills, but in a very different way. And they could also ask things like, okay, compare the two. How did you think you went? How would you change your approach next time? Okay. So I hope that kind of gives an idea of what are the kinds of interview stations that they can ask you. All right. Okay. Answering structure. So look, structure is important, but I think it's best to be simple here. You don't have a lot of time. Okay. So, and there's really there's no correct structure, but the fact that you just need to have it means that you should try to have something that works well for you. I might have said this before, but really the only thing that I guess for structure, the important thing is just to keep things simple. And the structure that I use is essentially, okay, there are two things I want to talk about. Firstly, secondly, and that's it. There's literally nothing else because I didn't have any other time to talk about it in Melbourne, in the Melbourne interview. Otherwise, there are things that you can rely on, but you might not have time for it. So things like STAR framework, which I can't even remember what that stands for anymore, it can be helpful, but are you spending too much effort to remember what that actually means versus an intuitive structure that allows you to be flexible? So you kind of have to make that decision where, okay, am I wasting my effort trying to remember this kind of structure and the spikes framework for delivering bad news? Is that too much effort when I can just do things differently? When I can just be flexible and focus entirely on the content? Okay. Okay, I have some example structures here. Broad overview statements that signpost the points. So this is a video that shows two young children fighting over cooking utensils in a kitchen setting. This is a daytime photo of an outdoor natural landscape with distant hills, mountains, along with a road in the foreground. So I have a starting overview statement, a broad overview statement, and then just jump into it. So there are two advantages in working with a team. Firstly, and then secondly, basically what we said before. Firstly, teamwork enables. So this is the thing. Don't signpost what you're going to say because you're going to forget it. Just say there are two things I want to discuss. Firstly, secondly. And most of the time, if you're saying, okay, if you say this, the advantages of working in a team are different perspectives and more manpower. Firstly, I'll talk about different perspectives. By the time you finish talking about different perspectives, you're going to forget what you said about the second point, or even like labeling in terms of signposting the second point. So just say that 2 points, get straight into the first point, and then get straight into the second point. And this is often the case where I actually forgot, like I said before, I forgot what the second point was when I directly signposted it. So you kind of have to do it on the spot. Okay, kind of just have to think about things on the spot. And then concluding statement, not very important. You're kind of just saying, you kind of just want to end things in a bit more formal way, and not just saying things like, and yeah, that's it. Just say, these are the two advantages. These are the two similarities. These are the two differences. Okay. But if you get cut off, that's fine. At least you finish your answer. It's a concluding statement, not that important. So the theory of essentially what we're trying to do is demonstrate the key qualities that the medical schools want us to have and therefore want to nurture. So this is what we said before. Do research, learn about what particular topics actually mean. What is good teamwork? What is good leadership? Okay, so do some research and you'll sort of understand, okay, good teamwork is a situation where people are respectful to one another. Good teamwork is a situation where people feel safe, are able to outwardly express their concerns, and there's no element of animosity within it. So make sure you understand what that actually means because it's going to direct your responses. Okay. Yeah, each topic has its own relevant principles that you want to explore, derive them from the desired attributes and skills. So, and then you want to identify your relevant experiences as per your experiences bank, and reflect and extract key demonstrations of desirable qualities for presentation. So that's kind of the principles of how you're going to answer the questions and what you're going to say. So here's kind of an example. So if we have the topic of giving and receiving feedback, these are kind of the principles you kind of want to explore and have a background understanding of. So you have to really understand the theory first before you can pick out your experiences. So this, I think, is the first step. Understand what it is about giving feedback. Why do we give feedback? How do we receive feedback? And how do we give feedback? Then you pick out an experience from your life and then try and fit the theory with your experience. Okay? So feedback is important because it provides an opportunity for growth. It's an outward demonstration of the investment of a resource from another individual, and it's also an indicator of worthiness for that investment of resources. How do we receive feedback? Well, a couple of things. As a recipient, I'm going to respect the time and resource expenditure from the other person and consider the words that consider the feedback that the other person has provided to me, and then either in the moment or at a different point in time, I'm going to self-reflect with honest commitment to change and improvement. So the answers that you give have to be grounded by the theory and the principles of what the topic is. Okay. Here's another kind of example. Learning styles and skill. So this is where you have to figure out, okay, what's important? What are some things that they're going to ask me about this topic? Well, how do we actually learn? Okay. And now there's no right or wrong answer to this, but you just need to come up with this yourself. You need to think about, okay, well, how do I learn? How do you identify your learning needs? And when should the learning style be changed? So once again, in any kind of topic, make sure you go through the theory, understand the principles of what's important within that particular topic. From there, you want to then, I suppose, consolidate your experiences and see whether or not there are things that match. And then that's what you need. And then as you develop your answer regarding your experiences, you have to make sure you bring out the things that they're looking for. So after understanding the key theory, build your skills and experiences bank. Basically what I said, craft your response to ensure that they demonstrate desirable aspects of a particular attribute and skill. So just some examples here. All right. Practice stations. Okay, so I know that was very, very quick, but I wanted to get to this because this is where we are going to do some practice. Okay, I'll turn off the recording